Chapter 14, Discovery. Rico woke up with a start as the daily bonk on the door proclaimed packages arrived, and Rico instinctively clamored for his phone. He wanted to go throw up at the thought of how much of a damn virus the world had become all of a sudden. Up had become down and left had become right. He tried to shake the thoughts out of his head of how many ethnicities and religions had been persecuted, while others enjoyed their magic-protected bubbles. All the while, the protected so-called minorities acted like they were the least protected and continued attacking the actual minorities using the excuse that they were invincible. As Rico barely crawled outside in time to dry heave, he remembered the word projection. He knew someone who had tried to show everyone the truth, had to try to show everyone what was really going on. The wolves had been running the hen house or whatever. The chicken had got before the cart, and the kettle was calling itself every color but the one it actually was. He closed his eyes and saw a book made of skinned faces, a book made by the worst demon of them all to confuse everyone. Every few months or years the page would change, the skin face would change, but the hate never changed. It was always the same hate. It changed who it hated, but it was always the same hate. People were so blind. Tiny ideas became bipolar. In unity they fed hate. In coexistence they fed hate. In solidarity they fed hate. In anti-hate they became hate. Rico heaved again. He wished he could talk to Joe, but he couldn't. He didn't know how to get a hold of Joe. There was no phone number or address, only memories. Rico needed to keep going. That's what Joe would want. Rico clambered back into the house to shut the door and checked his phone. He set the phone down for a second and realized what he wanted. Rico dug around through the drawers until he found some cans of Pixie Up, which was a fizzy citrus drink that was popular to calm stomach issues. Some more digging revealed some low-salt buttery crackers that weren't in their pack anymore. Couldn't remember what their name was or even guess on an expiration date. Didn't matter. Down the hatch they went, along with some citrus drink. There wasn't any caffeine, only pure citrus flavor that started calming his stomach instantly, and the crackers helped the nerves. He cursed the anti-haters, accusing everyone else of hating all the time. They tanked all the good movies and video games and plastic bags and soda bottles and straws and self-defense, and then they came for pro-Western culture. Joe didn't tolerate it, and neither would Rico. He would live and thrive regardless of whatever was going on around him. I checked the phone, and a lot of scrolling and zooming out got the focus of his map to the hill. It looked more like a cliff face when he went into 3D mode. Some zooming and creative scrolling made it look an awful lot like the thought trailed off. He punched in the command for analysis mode, and the overlay confirmed what he thought. There were caves leading into a network system. Rico couldn't believe it. It had been there all along. He'd been able to buy this place cheap because a past president had nullified it all being federal land, and that was why. Miles and miles away was a federally protected historical indigenous cave system. That's when Federico decided he was going to dig up his irrigation ditch a little bit after checking on it, then start working on that cave. What else was there to do, after all? Maybe there'd be clues as to the history of this area that he could learn from. Probably better prepare. It was decided. That was the plan. After breakfast and packing up some more items, he was ready to go. Rico dug up the little area at his local water pit that had started filling up so it could start irrigating his old garden areas. Rico completely locked up, which he never did, but he had a weird feeling. In his little basket, he packed his daily tea jar and a pack with a few days of provisions and his pickaxe. He'd get his shovel on the way and had a few gallon bags of breakfast and lunch mix just in case. A look around his homestead as the sun rose showed the prior plants around his garden slowly being resurrected. The spots where there was nothing, he threw in a few heirloom seeds for good measure and tapped them in for safekeeping. The water paths he dug had leached into the garden overnight, and he nodded and smiled. It was time to go. Chapter 15, Adventure. With all his gear in his basket or on his back, and fully charged electronic equipment, Rico set off to the wild beyond. Half pedaling and half motoring, he headed into the rising sun. His helmet's anti-glare protection shielded his eyes from the morning rays, and he puttered along passing tires and tumbleweeds, going about their morning routines. The seeming predetermined lines that were on didn't disrupt Rico's route, though, and he made sure to not interrupt any of their morning business. Predetermined paths. Predetermined. There we go. Rico rode on for what seemed like half an hour, listening to the air zipping by his head, and thought about some music. There was a headphone jack and speakers in his helmet that would work perfectly. He decided against it, though, and he wanted to be able to listen for that big truck if it seemed to come around again. When Rico would get up on a slightly higher mound than the rest, he'd stop for a quick break to look around, but saw or heard nothing. The sun in the sky indicated that possibly an hour or so had passed. The buzzards still stalked him overhead like an all-seeing eye, but seemed to be watching him less like food and more like a reality TV show or a daytime soap opera. By the phone's estimate, he was a little over halfway there and could reach the cliff face within an hour at his current pace. That's all he needed to know, and off he puttered. More pedaling than motoring got him to the cliff face before lunchtime, and the indicator on his bike showed him he had managed to save quite a bit of his battery reserves. The cliff face seemed to go on several meters straight up, although it was impossible to really tell from this perspective. As if more of his new routine, Rico told the drone to go map the caves and let him know what it found. He checked all of his messages this time, and it told the drone to only use 75% power to make sure it could return safely. The drone complied, and off it went as Rico pushed his bike up an ancient stone ramp and up into the cave face. After several more stories of ramps, there was an outcropping of sorts that jutted out from the rest of the cliff face, as if it was a deck of some sort. Rico went in a few of the caves and popped his head back out again as a reference until he found the entrance to that area. He set his backpack out there and unfolded some portable solar panels and plugged everything in. He also had an external antenna he plugged in that would strengthen his communication with the drone as well as other radio devices. Rico set out his tea on the side also as the sun crested the vertex, creating direct line of sight with the balcony. The travel solar panels activated and the tea began to cook, and Rico was happy. Digging through more of his boxes, he found one with a 45-degree clip-on flashlight and clipped it. It was still dark, though, even after turning on the light, and he remembered that his helmet was still on. So he hung the helmet off his bike and affixed his cowboy hat proper. The light shone bright, but with the helmet off, Rico decided to let his eyes adjust instead. As his eyes readjusted, the light slowly directly illuminated the cave face and began pushing its way outside the dense network of cave tunnels. Rico was currently in a room that seemed like a bedroom of sorts, complete with a stone slab for a bed location, a personal fireplace, and a hygiene area. None of it had been used in hundreds of years, but there was still charcoal in the fireplace. It was cozy, yet it felt very welcoming, like he was supposed to be here. He took his backpack off, complete with his overnight gear, just in case, and set it on the stone slab. The stone was cold, of course, but kept one's self off the drafty floor. His bike parked in the corner with a stand down nice and out of the way. Sun illuminated more of the tunnels as it became more angled properly. It was a good time for Rico to eat. Chapter 16, Strange Depths. During eating, the drone had found its way back and hooked into its base, being close enough to get a signal to Rico's phone. Much of the inner workings of the cavernous living space was now documented. The drone estimated it was 33% complete with a 76% margin of error due to the multitudes of scouting variabilities. Rico shrugged and tried his radio and cell one more time. Neither got a signal, even with the external radio antenna he put up, so he powered down his radio and put his phone back in Wi-Fi mode. Rico opened back up the map software for the drone and programmed in for the drone to do 2 more sweeps once it was charged, and then called it a night. He tried to estimate how much power that would leave the main pack considering the charge it would get throughout the day and hoped it would have about a quarter power left.